everyone. Jess Stainbrook here with the Invisible Disabilities Association, and welcome to another episode of InCourage. And today we have a special guest with us, Tracy Houston from Colorado. Hello, Tracy.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing very good. I'm here and enjoying the warmer fall.
Yeah, that's great. Well, so Tracy and I have been communicating a little bit around an article that she wrote and has some aspirations of potentially moving into the book things. But Tracy, tell us some background. I mean, I won't even surprise people with the title yet. Tell us some background on what made you decide to write this article as well as some of the other things that you're thinking about.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the time here, and I'm honored to be able to share. Just a little background, I'm a Colorado native, and I was raised just north and west of DIA, Denver International Airport, in a rural kind of agricultural setting. And I was raised in the Presbyterian church and played my guitar in the contemporary services and sang in cantatas and traveled. And we had a youth group, so I did a lot of activities, including a lot of hiking. I feel like that a big part of who I am came from that kind of very physical, very can-do upbringing. And I'm very, very grateful. My grandparents lived down the road. They were dryland wheat farmers, and I spent many happy hours there. So that's just a little kind of from my childhood.
They're stout stock, aren't they?
Salt of the earth, hardworking, very loving. My dad was the youngest of 7 boys, so being a girl, I was cherished.
That's awesome.
Yes. So yeah, it's really nice to kind of be raised in, I guess some people think it's kind of a tribal, but it takes a tribe or it takes a group. So it was nice to have that. So as my start. So I wrote this essay that you have. It's called Hell, the Art and Science of Being in a Body That Hurts. And it's, I'm trying to write a book, but it's portions of some of my journey. On 12/1 of 2016, I had recently bought my home here, and I was headed into town to get paint. And a lady ran a stop sign. And basically, I didn't come home for a month. And I am very lucky to be alive. I endured multiple surgeries. And then I think it was almost 8 months before I walked without assistance. The engine of the car came in on me. And I'm very grateful for all the help that I've had. I'm approaching almost 300 provider visits. So it's been almost 5 years. Your people and your association are right in my sweet spot, because chronic pain is certainly invisible. And I have some concepts that I'd kind of like to share with you. So in that essay, I talk about what I call a term that I coined. It's called trauma death experience. And the definition of that, I think of Dante sometimes and how he says, I didn't die, but I lost life's breath. And that is what chronic pain takes. And it always takes, it doesn't ask. And I was in pain with every step I took for almost 4 years. I'm very fortunate to have finally found a kind of a suite of therapies that's bringing me some relief. So while I'm still in pain, I don't have it 24/7 like I used to, thank God.
I might insert right here too, because some folks, we have a wide audience for these shows, And, chronic pain and illness is really, it can cover so many different things. I mean, yours was a car accident that then led to continuing pain that again, people can't see, right? That's when we talk about invisible disabilities, things like fibromyalgia or MS, or I mean, there's all kinds of things that have that chronic pain component to it. And it's interesting, as you say, that, it takes away the breath of life. And I know a lot of people struggle with that because, again, it's not uncommon in our space for somebody to say, well, you look fine. I mean, again, for me to look at you through our camera here, I mean, you're a nice looking woman and you're in a nice space and everything seems fine, but people just don't know. And a lot of what we do and what we're trying to do is really communicate how do you have this conversation and engage with somebody when you find out that they do have some kind of invisible disability or chronic pain or something that they're dealing with. And so I do appreciate you sharing your story, because I think it helps others understand how do we have these conversations? What are some outlets for maybe struggling through the pain? I mean, I think journaling is a great way to do things, and it usually sometimes it will bring up stuff like what you're talking about, is a way to create an article that makes more sense for you in a truncated fashion to share some of the things that you're talking about. So yeah, tell us more about this TDE thing that you came up with.
Well, I appreciate you mentioning the writing, because now I'm doing these are little zines, and they're miniature magazines or books, but some of the concepts that I've come up with, I'm writing in them. And so the definition of a trauma death experience, a TDE, is I call it a ruthless catapulting, where your life is snatched away and you now live in a no man's land with no preparation or defense. And while that can be a long sentence, it's what happened to me. Pretty much. I had very little experience with the health world. I was healthy and did my annual whatevers. That was about it. And to have now almost 300 provider appointments tells you I spent almost a year, 365 days in a year in that environment. And so there wasn't one part of my life that wasn't disrupted all the way to, on a continuum, to wiped out. And so the lack of your identity at the time of the accident, as I mentioned, I was raised kind of in a physical environment, but continued that. And I was taking groups into the Grand Canyon on 3-day backpacking trips with 40 pounds on my back. And I went from that in a second to being flat on my back in a wheelchair for months. And then I walked with a walker, and then with crutches, and then finally with a cane. And so, over that period of 8 months. And to have that happen, along with the social isolation that anything chronic, as you mentioned, there's an aloneness that comes with that. One of the harsher realities of chronic pain is that it's in your body and it's just you. And there isn't any way of getting around that. So even if you have people in your home, which I didn't, but you're still alone in something that's very foreign, and it feels like it's inside of you, in the sense of when I say it takes and it never asks, it is like a force. It ultimately took my identity, and I felt like it was after my soul.
Well, it's interesting. I know you mentioned in this essay about resilience and patience, and I didn't I didn't know the cause of your invisible disability and really what we were going to talk about. It's ironic because in 2014, very similar situation happened to me that a lot of people don't know about. I mean, you know, a lot of people see me as very athletic, and you know, I grew up as an athlete, went to college on you know, for athletics, and just a lot. I kept playing and continued to coach and stuff. But in 2014, I was in a car accident, and it was I don't know what yours was like, but it was traumatic. A girl T-boned me when she was high and texting at the same time. So she didn't see me, and she just plowed into my car, and my car rolled. So she hit me on the passenger side, and it rolled, which means that the driver's side is what hit the concrete. And luckily, and I have no idea how, I mean, you talk about growing up, you know, in the Presbyterian church and faith, and I'm a man of faith, and I truly do believe that God must have protected me, because somehow I didn't hit my head, but the rest of the left side of my body was uh, very much damaged. And I went through a time about 18 months, like you're talking about. I don't think it was bad as what you're saying, but my left side didn't work. And it hasn't worked the same ever since. And it's been interesting that when you deal with something like that, there is a strong mental component that comes at you, because and I've talked to a lot of people about this in the context of, you know, people talk about what the new normal is, and while you're trying to heal and get better, sometimes there's only you can only make it part way. And the question is, can you accept the part way, and how is this going to go from now on? It's interesting. I'm working with a group on a film project called Unfixed, and it really is the stories of people very similar, I think, to what you're talking about, that have different invisible disabilities, that have for years sought out cures and treatments and everything, and now are telling their stories of how they're just accepting who they are as they are, and trying to get on with life that way. And I will say that's very difficult. I mean, you know, I've coached all of my girls in soccer, and yet I had to stop, right? I couldn't run anymore. I don't know if I've kicked the ball since that happened. But yeah, things come at you. What are some of the other things for you, Tracy, that you've kind of done to, I don't know, move forward in this process of accepting what things are like after something like that happens?
I've got a couple of things. I want to talk a little bit about curiosity over hope,
Hmm.
which goes right into your speaking about acceptance. We live in a culture that's really, and I am part of this, that's very upward, kind of, you know, we always should be achieving our goals, moving forward. And then you run into something, either a physical illness or chronic something or other, that has its own reality, and you can't really fit into that. And so I've written a little bit about why I chose curiosity over hope. Hope is asking something of you. And I'm going to tell you that chronic pain already has its dibs on your energy, or whatever kind of lift up that hope might give you. You don't have it. And so I write about a veneer of expectancy, and it's cruel. It is a cruel thing to put on people who are chronically ill or in pain, to keep them, you know, in that place of expectancy. So what I proposed, and this is what I did, was follow what I was curious about. And I found that helped me in some ways. I engaged with YouTube quite a bit because of the cognitive difficulties. I couldn't read. And so I just kept, if there was a certain topic I was interested in, I just kept watching or listening to YouTube videos. So curiosity to me is much more fitting for people with, whether it be invisible or not, people who are struggling. And I'm not totally against hope. It's just not a good fit for someone in chronic situations. I think the other thing that's helped me, and I didn't come across this therapy until I've been in this therapy about a year now, and it's called Hakomi. And Hakomi is a somatic kind of mindful approach to trauma. And actually the headquarters is in Boulder, Colorado. And Hakomi is a Native American Indian word, and to me it means, who am I in these many realms? And I write about the realm of chronic pain being much like, for those who don't have chronic illness or chronic pain, nowadays we can have these virtual goggles. And you can be in the same room with someone that has these virtual goggles on, and let's say you don't and someone does. And they're laughing and they're totally absorbed and all their attention is in this world. Well, that's exactly, in a non-entertainment way, what chronic pain does. It takes your attention, and that's what it's after. And so that realm, if you will, that's an example of virtual goggles, is you're in the same room, but that person is really in another realm. And that's what it's like to be with someone in chronic pain. And then to also be the person in chronic pain when you're sitting around with people, they're in another world that you aren't in. And that kind of goes to the aloneness. But Hakomi, the Native American Indian word, who am I in these many realms? That's what it means. And so that idea of virtual goggles and being in a realm kind of explains, at least to some degree, the lack of identity and then finding yourself in that realm. And the counseling is such that, because it's mindful, there's a lot of going, it's not talk therapy so much, there's a lot of going to your inner resources. So if you're a believer, that helps you tap that, or other inner resources to kind of help ease the suffering. And it
sounds a little bit like, what is it, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, that people use to change the way that they think and address problems and issues that are coming forward. I mean, I've never heard of the Hakomi thing, but it is interesting to hear about it. I mean, as I'm looking real quickly, it says that basically you're starting to address your pain and or illness through awareness, not efforting, right? In other words, you could wish, and like you said, a hope for betterness, but that's not the reality, right? I mean, it's kind of one of those things. It's interesting. It reminds me of James Stockdale. I need to find the quote exactly so that I don't mess it up. Oh, here it is. You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of what's right in front of you.
Oh, that's perfect, because Hakomi is about, or at least my experience, it's not about transcending the suffering, but being with it. So whatever that is for you, bringing whatever resources you have to be with that suffering. And so for me, when I've written a little bit about this, I call what I tap into during that is source or God or the divine. People have all different words for that. And that was the only thing that I found that was bigger than pain. So extremely helpful, very difficult, very rubber meets the road. It makes talk therapy, not that talk therapy isn't helpful, but it makes it look like kindergarten. Because when you get brave enough or big enough to sit so close with your pain that your eyes are closed at times during the therapy and you're looking inward or just sitting in your awareness and seeing what shows up in some of the most difficult topics. So while we start talking, the work isn't so much about that talk, it's about what happens when you're doing what they call mindfulness meditation. And it's extremely, well, my counselor is a palliative care doctor, so she's helped many people pass, which again goes back to many realms. So she's extremely comfortable, and like yourself, has had auto accidents. So she has firsthand experience, and really lacks. They give you training for this, but she's not a full trained, psychologist and all that counselor speak. Not helpful for people in chronic pain. You want relief.
Yeah, I mean, the stories that we get from pretty much everybody that gets in touch with us are very similar to what you're talking about. And I think what you're saying is there's lots of different ways to deal with it. And sometimes we get stuck with just the woe is me, but there is this thing that we need to understand about that. I mean, we hear lots of stories about, the guy from Boulder that's blind and climbed Mount Everest, or there's all of these heroic stories. Well, guess what? Not all of us have that or have that ability. And so I think what you're saying is really, how do we deal with the pain that we have in us for what's going on in a more positive way that helps us just get through life on a day-to-day basis. And it could be an outward thing then that people start to notice and might ask about, hey, what is that you're doing? I mean, I can see a difference, or they might even ask how they can help, I mean, yeah, it's really interesting stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah, and the idea that there's a threshold, I think, that can be a little scary to, even close your eyes and really kind of sit with something that's extremely troubling. But I think, who am I in that threshold as I cross it? And what resources will be there, whether it be God or the divine? A lot of kind of the latest tough, sexy deal is being resilient, which I think you mentioned. It's in my article. And so the early fruit, which I tried to grab, would be all this writing about resilience. And the way I describe resilience is, or the concept that seems to be put out is, it's like a tree and a big wind comes up. And so the tree is going to bend a little, but the tree's resilient. So when the wind stops blowing, the tree's going to stand back up. Well, that didn't last me very long. And then pretty soon I was trying to be patient, because that's another thing that comes with some of the religious beliefs or body of knowledge. Will kind of lean a little bit more towards patience. So I found myself in that realm. And with patience, the tree kind of bends a little farther and it can come back up, but not quite. But in the situations that I found myself in, and probably many people that you're working with, the trauma death experience, you're wiped. Your identity's gone, your life is gone, and you keep experiencing it over and over and over again. So the idea of having some kind of source that's bigger than all that it's really life affirming.
For sure. It reminds me of my wife is a marine biologist and, loves science, and so do my girls. And, we've been to Costa Rica quite a few times, and it's interesting that the analogy I think of is, yes, a tree can bend, and the resilience, and, we talk about Gen Z and there's no grit, all that stuff. Well, sometimes when something like this happens, literally the tree just falls over, right? Well, in the jungle, the tree falls over and, oh my goodness, it provides a whole new life based on the fact that now it's fallen over as opposed to standing up. And I'd be just curious, how is it that we look at things in that manner, in such a way that what is it that might be the next part of our lives in this new manner based on what we're dealing with. I mean, like I said, you look at a tree in the jungle in Costa Rica that has fallen over, and all these bromeliads, like there's this whole new ecosystem that is formed as a result of that happening. And so, how do we look at ourselves in that same context and say, what is it that I can take to, like, what I don't know, why is this coming at me, right? How do I get through it? Well, some of things like that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the concept is great, because even if you study how trees die, when a tree is growing, most of the nutrients go up. And when a tree begins to die or come to end of its life, it sends its nutrients out. And so that concept that you have, I think I've thought about that. Up until the time that I couldn't take one step without being in pain, it was all I could do to survive. So your idea of what's the next phase of my life going to be like, I was not able to be there. I was struggling in that whole, as that's why I write about the trauma death experience. It's it's a survive day to day, minute to minute. So I think until a person gets a sense of capacity, it's really difficult to move to that. But then if you can get some sense of capacity and get some idea of how to help others or help yourself, for me it's writing and the art therapy that I'm doing now. So
Hmm.
I'm very
That's really
excited
cool.
about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Well, it makes me think of, the 5 stages of grief, right? I'm sure that when we experience something in the disability realm, it's probably and we haven't had that before. The interesting thing about disabilities is it's the largest minority group in the world that anybody can enter and exit at any time in their life, right? Some invisible disabilities are temporary, some of them are permanent, but it's that same kind of thing. So it makes me wonder, do we have that same kind of thing where, we would go into denial and then we would be angry, we would bargain, like I'll do anything for, to turn this off, and then a depression that follows it. And, that final stage of grief is acceptance. And like I said, with the unfixed folks, that it's interesting to hear their stories, because um, there's an acknowledgement of what's happened, and then again, how is it that I move through this, and I should say into this, not through it, because it's not over, right? It's people are still dealing with it. So yeah, it's interesting. Well,
Yeah,
what
I
are
think.
there? Oh, sorry, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Well, when you speak of grief, the grief that I had, I needed to be companioned. I needed to have it witnessed. And I think it's just really hard to find people who can come into the space with you and really like be there in a deep listening way. Um, really, really tough. So I think that if your providers or your family members or friends can help with that, it will certainly help with the grief process and the mourning, the outward mourning of it. So my grief was so bad, my brain was affected. I mean, it was cognitively even affected me. So, and it's, for me, it was, grief is a natural process. It is a signal of love. And I had built a life myself that I really valued, and it was gone.
Mm,
So,
wow. Well, I really appreciate you coming and hanging out with us today and sharing your things. Any last thoughts in uh, your advice for people that might be dealing with chronic pain?
hmm. Well, as much as a person can to reach out and connect, because that feeling of being alone, I think it makes it worse. And yet it's somewhat part of it. It's just a terrible, harsh reality. So your work, all of the, with the videos and the blogs and the reaching out to people with the documentaries, I think can help with that. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah, no, thanks for joining us. It's so good to have you here. A lot of folks, like Tracy said, there's a lot of resources that we have available online. And we know that they don't necessarily cover everything, but we do encourage you to uh, try to have friends and family that can walk through the things with you that you're going through. So yeah, thanks so much, Tracy, for sharing all your thoughts. And I hope to get your article out there so we can see that. And I really wish you great luck with your book.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.